Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of September. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to discuss the most important region in this phase of special operation. We're going to discuss Liman bridgehead and the Oskol-Liman Frontline. If we take a look at the Western sources map, you're going to see that this map hasn't been updated. There are no changes on this map, but just some changes on the north near Dvorieshche and Kupiansk, showing that the area between the Russian territory and this blue cloud is the territory is in the gray zone. But if we take a look at the Russian sources map, the picture is totally different, and there are a lot of changes. First of all, let's discuss Liman bridgehead. As you can see, this green line is the yesterday's front line, the yesterday's status of the front line. As you can see, the Ukrainians managed to develop the front line. They managed to take control over few towns in this area. And the most important update, that Ukrainians, according to the Russian source information, managed to enter Shandrigolova, this town. This is one of the most important towns because now the Ukrainians are very close to the Russian defense line from Novoselovka, Drobyshevo, Liman, and they're trying to encircle Liman from the north, and they're pretty successful in this. If we're talking about the area near Liman, the Russians are still there. Today there were few attempts from the Ukrainian side to storm these towns, but all their attempts were blocked. The Ukrainians had a lot of losses and were forced to retreat. But I believe that the main idea of the Ukrainians attack in the south was just to pin down the Russians and not to give them opportunity or any possibilities to move their reserves to the north and to stop the Ukrainians on the line between Shandrigolova. This area, almost the town like Peski, Radkovsky, Vyше Salona, Izumska, these towns between the green line and the gray line is in the gray zone, because somewhere at the middle of this day we got updates that Ukrainians managed to take Redkadupa Nova, this town. But right before I start recording this video, we got update that the Russians are saying that they still control Nova, the 20th Army, Russian Federation Army, and they're still there and they control this area. So the situation is very critical and it's difficult to understand what's going on. But anyway, as we discussed yesterday, this is the first Ukrainian attack, first attempt in this area, and the Russians are saying that this is that Ukrainian offensive operation is on the higher stage, so they won't be able to move more reserves in this area. So it's like the top of their possibilities. I'm not saying that the Russians are able to block these top possibilities. It's very likely that it's a very high chance that the Russians may be defeated and will be forced to move back. Furthermore, if the Russians loses Zelena Dolina, Novaya, and so on, and if the Ukrainians are able to get Novolyubovka and these lakes, then the Russians will be forced to leave Liman and all these towns towards Kremenaya and towards more reliable position on the east side of these water reservoirs. So now let's talk about the situation in more details. First, let's update the Western sources map for better understanding. According to the Russian sources, the Ukrainians managed to take small towns like Redkadub and Shandrigolova. So let's keep this town like Lipova Nova, this area, under Russian control, because we got some updates that the Russians still there. But anyway, the Ukrainians now are able to attack the Russians from the north, and they're doing this right now. What the Ukrainians are trying to do. First of all, we need to understand that there are a lot of Russians in this area. There are like 20th Russian army, a lot of tank divisions and so on, and they are always trying to push, and they're doing a very big, heavy pressure on the Ukrainians from the north. All the time they're trying to attack, to pin down, to reduce the Ukrainians as much as possible. But furthermore, the Ukrainians need to develop their offensive operation direction of Drobyshevo Liman for one purpose. They need to destroy the Russian defense order in this area, and this will allow the Ukrainians to move their reinforcement from Slaviansk bridgehead to this direction using the railroad. I believe that sooner or later they will be able to restore the bridge or something like this, and to move their forces here, and this will allow them to develop their offensive operation on the territory of Svatova and LPR. So for these purposes, the Ukrainians split their army in two parts. The first part now are doing just one job. They're building their defense orders on the area of Red Kadub with one purpose, to reduce the Russian pressure and not to allow them to be effective in their counter-offensive operation. Another group are moving to the south, trying to encircle Drobushevo and Liman from the north. If we're talking about the losses, about the Ukrainian losses during the previous 24 hours, the Russians are saying that they attack 14 mechanized brigade, 95th mechanized brigade in this area. Let's take a look at the Russian sources map. The Russians attack 14th mechanized brigade near Senkova and 95th mechanized brigade near Yatskovka in this bridge near Oskol. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that they attack forces from Foreign Legion forces in this area near Svetogorsk, and as a result of those attacks, the Ukrainian lost around more than 220 soldiers and something around 15 armored vehicles just as a result of rocket attacks. Today it's very difficult to calculate the losses on the ground, but I believe that number is very high. Now let's move to the north, and as you can see, there are also a lot of updates from this area. The Ukrainians managed to develop their bridgehead near Dvurechny, and today we got the final confirmation that the Ukrainians established entire control over this area, and now they're preparing for further storm operation over Tevilzhanka, over this town. And if they're able to do this, of course they will achieve a lot of square meters where they will be able to develop their offensive operation in any direction, in direction of LPR, Republic, and the main goal of the global scope of all these attacks is to attack Svatova, this big town. This is like the region center of this area, and this is the west biggest town in the west of LPR. So this is the main goal, this is the main direction where the Ukrainians are planning to move from Red Kadub bridgehead, Liman bridgehead, and from Kupiansk, Dvurechye bridgehead. Furthermore, the Ukrainians also today we got report that they're preparing for another storm operation of Liman Pervy and Sinkova, these two towns. If the Ukrainians are able to take these towns, then they will be able to establish a road connection, a stable connection between Dvurechye and between Kupiansk. And if we take a look at the Western sources map, you're gonna see that there is a railroad. You see that there is a railroad Dvurechye, and by taking these towns they will be able to at least establish some railroad connection with Dvurechye, with Kupiansk, and of course they will increase their logistic capabilities in this area. So the situation is very critical. The Russians during the first 3 attempts of Ukrainian offensive operation, they were saying that situation is difficult. And starting today, the Russians reported that situation is critical. They are using the same words as they used during the Balaklia offensive operation. But the Balaklia offensive operation, the Russians from the very beginning started using these words like critical situation. And today, just on today, they start to use these words on this front line. Of course, the Ukrainians are moving more and more reinforcements. I'm not sure about their reserves, if they have more. I believe they have, but I'll repeat myself, the Russians are saying that this offensive operation is on the top of its possibilities, and if the Ukrainians are able to break through this bridgehead, these Russian defense orders this night and tomorrow, then they will be able to take as much as possible. But if they will be defeated during the next day, today or tomorrow, then the Russians will be able to stabilize the front line finally, and then they will be able to start counter-offensive operation. The Russian sources are saying that according to the current situation with mobilization, with moving forces, and so on, they are planning to start counter-offensive. They are able to start counter-offensive operation in this area just in November. So we need to understand that the Ukrainians still have at least a month to do something on this bridgehead. They have months, and that's a lot. That's a lot. And if they are able to achieve the same success as they achieved during the previous months, then they will be able maybe even to cut a very big piece of LPR during these months. And after that, we will see what is going to be after that. This is about Liman and Oskol Frontline. So just one more time, just repeat one more time. The Ukrainians took control over these Dvoriechia and they managed to enter Tavlozhenka. Furthermore, they're preparing their offensive operation in direction of Liman Первый. And in this direction, just one purpose to connect these two areas. If we're talking about Kupiansk, more and more Ukrainians are there, and we can say that 100% Kupiansk is under Ukrainian control. What the Ukrainians are doing right now, they're waiting for more reserves, and maybe they still have some reserves in this area. If we're talking about Liman area, the Russians are very they are able to still to hold this position, and they're doing this. As you can see, the Ukrainians couldn't move front line in this area, but they have been penetrated from the north, and now the Ukrainians are trying to develop their bridgehead on the north of Liman and trying to prepare more fortification and more trenches with one purpose: to stop the counter-offensive operation of the Russians from the north. Now let's talk about Seversk and Bakhmut front line. If we're talking about Seversk, there are no changes on this front line. The situation is stable, but we got more updates, a lot of updates from Bakhmut area. And if we're talking about Bakhmut, now the situation is critical from the Ukrainian side, because as you can see, Zaitseva has been encircled, and the Russians managed to enter the west-south part of Zaitseva, and they managed to cut Zaitseva forces from the mainland. Furthermore, the Russians are attacking from this area, from these energy facilities towards Zaitseva from the north. So I believe that soon we are going to see the collapse of Zaitseva defense and maybe some kind of encirclement, because I'm not sure that it's possible to leave Zaitseva without any losses. Furthermore, the Russians entered Adranovka, the small town on the north from Nikolaevka, also from the east part. And this situation also is not very good for the Ukrainians, because these forces also encircled and won't be able to evacuate from this area. These days, the Russians continue storming operation of the front fortifications and the front line between in this back. So the Ukrainians have their fortification right in this position. So this is their fortification, very powerful, and they're trying to keep this area as long as possible. And now the Russians start the storming from three sides in this area, and I believe that soon this area is also going to collapse. At least the Russians are saying like this. If we're talking about Bakhmut, Solidar, the situation is stable, just artillery duels and so on. The only a few updates that the Russians are trying to do something on the road, from Bakhmutska in this direction, trying to maybe to move a little bit further in direction of Solidar and just to establish some fire control over these logistic roads and to cut Solidar from supply and support. This is about Bakhmut. If we're talking about Donetsk, there are no changes, just local battles, Reko and combounds, and nothing more. And a lot of updates are coming from Ugledar. At least some Russian sources are saying that maybe this night, from 26th of September to 27th of September, the Ukrainians are planning to start counter-offensive operation near Ugledar. They have already collected a lot of forces, a lot of ammo shells, a lot of tanks, armored vehicles, and they are ready to start anything, to do something. And I believe that tomorrow is the final day of referendum, and of course this is the best day when the Ukrainians can do something, because tomorrow we are going somewhere at 10 or maybe 11 p.m. of local time. Tomorrow we are going to see the results, and I believe that maybe on the 28th or 29th of September these all regions are going to become a part of Russian Federation. So that's why the Ukrainians need to do something this night. And more and more sources are saying, I repeat myself, that they will start counter-offensive operation this night, and they will try to attack in direction of Volnovakh and direction of Dokuchaevsk. Just the same tactic, to move as much as possible mobile forces. This mobile force would have just one job: to move as far as possible, trying to make a mess in Russian defense order, and then from the back they will attack all this area using the HIMARS and M777 artillery systems. And between these two situations we're going to see a lot of tanks that will follow the mobile troops, and they will try to reduce the Russians as much as possible. But the Russians are saying that at least we can't check this or to to prove or disapprove it, but they're saying that they're ready, they're prepared. The situation on Zaparosa Frontline is not the same as in Kharkiv Frontline. There is a third military corps and many other type of forces, so they're ready and they expect the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation in this area. Now we are moving in direction to Kherson in this area. There are also a lot of updates from this area. The Russians are using their Iranian drones, and today we got another reports from Achakov that they destroyed some boats in this area. The Ukrainians, the thing is, the Russians are saying the situation is not very good for the Ukrainians in Kherson district. Their RECO, the Russian intelligence, are saying that because of the fact that the Ukrainians totally concentrated all their reserves, all their military possibilities on the north of Kharkiv area in LPR Republic, they moved everything they have to this direction, and now they have some problems with artillery and shells in this area. There are some HIMARS systems in this area, but the Russians are saying that they have lack of HIMARS rockets, and the same situation, lack of shells for the Ukrainian 777 M777 artillery systems. If we are talking about like the battles on the ground, just small RECO in combats, the Ukrainians managed to rebuild or restore some pontoon bridges on Andreevka bridgehead, so that means that they are not planning to give up in this situation, but there are no offensive operation, just artillery battles, artillery duels, trying to prepare more and more pontoon bridges. Also the Ukrainians have some activity on the area between Nikolaev and Kherson, and to be more precise, near Ternovo Pody and Lyubimovka, these two towns. According to the Russian sources, this area is still under Russian control. So without no doubt, there is no even like any other option from the Russian side. But the Ukrainians, these two towns is in the gray zone as far as I understand. And if we're talking about Lyubimovka, this area is under Ukrainians. The Ukrainians moved foreign volunteers to this area, so I believe that maybe they prepare something in this area as well. Furthermore, they're preparing more and more defense position near Ternovo Pody, this area. So the Ukrainians are fortifying this position near Lyubimovka and Ternovo Pody, maybe for upcoming further offensive operations. They just want to be on the safe side if the Russians will decide to attack in their flanks or to start some counter-offensive operation, while the Ukrainians will try to attack in direction of Kherson district. Furthermore, the Ukrainians moved some artillery systems to Achakov, to this area, and to entire this area. And during the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked this 406 artillery brigade in this area, and the loss of this brigade is around 50 soldiers, 10 armored vehicles. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that they managed to destroy a small ammo depot with 2,000 shells. They didn't clarify about the systems, about these shells, or it's HIMARS rockets, or it's old Soviet 152mm shells. They didn't clarify, but anyway, 2,000 shells is like 1 week of work for some part of frontline, so that's why it's not a very good update for the Ukrainians. So tomorrow is the final day of referendum, and after that we are going to see totally different picture also about the global updates. Today, the president of Republic of Belarus visited Russian Federation and believed that he received some instructions what to do in the next days. Furthermore, today we get some updates, maybe some kind of speculation, maybe some kind of fake updates, but anyway, at least I haven't heard about this anything that the Republic of Belarus maybe, according to some sources, also planning to close the border for the young men, not to allow them to leave the Belarus because of upcoming events. Furthermore, some Russian sources are saying that maybe after the 20s, after the 30th of September, the beginning of October, maybe the Russians will use some nuclear weapon, but they're planning to do this on the west part of Ukraine in this area, just to demonstrate their capabilities, and their main goal, of course, to do these attacks on the border with Poland, just to slow down everybody and so on. I believe that it's 70% speculation. The only thing that stops me to think that it might be speculation is that a lot of US authorities like Blinken and other very powerful authorities in the United States of America are talking about nuclear attack and are talking about preventing the Russians to do this. So if the USA talks about this, that means that at least there is some truth in this, maybe in this speculation. I don't want to believe that the Russians are going to do this, but anyway, who knows, because the situation is really critical. And as I see, it's very difficult for the Russians to stabilize the front line. And I believe that Ukrainians are not planning to stop their counter-offensive operation when this territory is going to become a part of Russian Federation. And I can't even imagine what is going to be next. Furthermore, you heard that today the president of Turkey reported that the Russians are ready for some negotiations, but the terms of negotiation are totally different from those that was in the March. I believe that now, if the Russians are ready to start for some peace, but anyway, they are ready just in case if all these territories that are already under control should remain under their control. This is like their term, I believe so. And of course, the not joining the NATO by the Ukraine and not joining the European Union by the Ukraine as well. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds me to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.